We've all heard of Mount Rushmore before, but maybe you're wondering, if you visit Mount Rushmore, what else is there to do besides just look at the faces?
We're Matt and Cheryl, and we have visited Mount Rushmore several times. And in fact, we write travel guides and have been doing it since 2020.
So today we're going to help you see what you can do at one of the most famous landmarks in America.
All right, so the first one is to visit the Avenue of Flags. As you park and walk into Mount Rushmore, that's one of the first things you're going to see is there's going to be a flag for every state. And they're in alphabetical order. It's really cool to see all of the states represented.
They actually kind of frame in the faces as you walk up, so it's a pretty cool grand entrance into Mount Rushmore. And of course, everybody wants to find their flag and take their picture near the flag.
And just a little pro tip is that this is kind of interesting about what you pay and what you don't pay for here is there's no admission to visit Mount Rushmore, but you do have to pay to park your car. It's $10, and your pass is actually good for an entire year, but really no one's excluded from the parking fee.
Okay, the next thing to do is, of course, to take your selfie with the faces. You have to get your picture with Mount Rushmore.
Some people say these faces are kind of small, but they're actually 60 feet tall. That's a 6-story building. You're just kind of far away, and so we brought our binoculars today.
Yeah. I think it's an incredible, impressive accomplishment. They are so lifelike, and if they were just a little off, they would look really kind of cartoonish, but they don't. They look fantastic, so I really appreciate the craftsmanship.
We are dealing with a lot of wind. It's going to be an adventure filming this video.
Yeah.
But one little pro tip is that, a lot of times you have to ask someone to take your picture here, and not everyone is a good photographer. And we had our Mount Rushmore writer. We have a whole bunch of blog posts on Mount Rushmore we write some of them, and then Brandy writes some of them, and she lives right here, so we can have a local expert. But she had someone take her picture here, and they took it, and they didn't put the president's faces in it. It was really disappointing. So make sure before you walk away from Mount Rushmore that picture has the faces in it and yours too.
We're here, by the way. We arrived here at sunrise this morning, but it's so cloudy. You can't really see the sun hitting the faces all that well. Hopefully they'll get lit up a little bit more. Okay, so up next is to walk the presidential trail. So where we are right now, this is a viewing area
deck,
here,
yeah.
a viewing deck. And from here, you can actually walk up closer to the faces. Now, you can't get, of course, up high by the faces, but the trail goes up along the base of the faces. It's called the Presidential Trail. It's where you can see the 4 different presidents. So the first one is Washington. He juts out the farthest and was the father of our country. And there is another viewpoint just outside of the park called the Profile Viewpoint. So as you're driving away from Mount Rushmore or to it, you can actually park at a little parking lot and see the side of the profile of Washington's face.
The next one on the mountain is Thomas Jefferson. And I love the look they have of Thomas Jefferson because he's looking further. And the cool thing about Jefferson, well, one of the cool things about Jefferson was that he expanded our country west. The Louisiana Purchase was huge, and that was him and just helping with the Lewis and Clark exploration. Fun little fact is, if you come here, you can get some Thomas Jefferson vanilla ice cream.
His original recipe.
Yes.
The next one up is Teddy Roosevelt, one of my favorites. The guy who created Mount Rushmore, the sculptor, he actually knew Teddy Roosevelt. And Teddy was a very, very popular president. And the interesting thing is that his cousin, Franklin D. Roosevelt, dedicated the memorial.
All right, and of course our last one is President Lincoln. Washington made our country, but Lincoln saved our country, and Abraham Lincoln was just amazing. And something kind of cool about this is he's one of the big reasons that they were able to get the sculptor Gutzon Borglum to come do it, is that Gutzon loved Abraham Lincoln, and he'd already made a pretty cool bust of him in DC, but he wanted another crack at making Lincoln even better.
Our pro tip here is to try out the audio guide. So yesterday we tried out the audio guide. You can rent this for $6 at the information center when you come in. And it's just something you listen to. You just push the number and listen to it. There's little numbers all over the presidential trail that tell you when to listen to it. And it does take longer, but we really liked that because it kind of made us take time to appreciate it. And then we learned so much about it by listening to that audio guide. So that's something you could check into if you're somebody who likes to learn about it when you're here.
All right, and I do have one other pro tip. This was the first time we came to Mount Rushmore was, probably 15 or 16 years ago. And none of us had ever been. We traveled with both sets of our parents and our small children. And before we left, we assigned everybody to research a historic figure from the Black Hills. One of the 4 presidents, Custer, just some of those people. And it made it so fun to know the history behind it. And so, if you're planning a trip, just take 10 or 15 minutes to know a little bit about one of the characters and share it with your group. It's so fun. We have a lot of resources to help you plan your trip to Mount Rushmore. We have a ton of blog posts on we'reintherockies.com all about visiting Mount Rushmore and the Black Hills. We also have a guide that you can just print off and an audio guide you can listen to. And we also have a free 5-day email course, Plan Your Trip to the Black Hills in 5 days, that breaks down all the areas of where to stay.
We'll put those links in the description. Okay, the next thing to do here, so when you're on the Presidential Trail, they have a little section over there called the Lakota Village. So they have a couple of teepees set up and then a little presentation station. And so yesterday when we were here, Red Cloud's grandson, so Red Cloud was a chief, Native American chief back in the Old West days. We're trying to keep our stuff from blowing over here. It's so windy this morning. Yes, the sun came out on the faces. That's awesome. Ah, beautiful. Anyway, Red Cloud's grandson was giving a presentation. I guess he used to be a park ranger and he's a public speaker. He gave such a wonderful presentation on some of the stuff that the Indians make and some of the history and the background behind it. There was a crowd gathered around. They were all fascinated.
That was
and
like
he took some pictures with us.
The biggest crowd. I mean, there were several people here, but everyone was gathering around him. Mm-hmm. He was such a dynamic speaker, and I guess they have 3 or 4 different speakers that come and speak. And it really is neat to learn about the Plains Indians from an actual Plain Indian. I feel so often when you go to a national park site, they have plaques and things like, there's a lot of scars in the Black Hills, like some rough history here. And I love to see what the national park is doing to help educate. I felt like our experience was so much more enriched from, of course I love to learn about our founding fathers, but I loved learning about the Plains Indians too, and just the amazing history of this. And so don't miss the Lakota Village.
So right when we got here, they had a Native American dance going on.
Some hoop dancers.
Yes, and then as you walk in, they have a section called the First Amendment section, which is for like freedom of speech. So there was some church groups and some other groups that were there with their little booths and stuff. They're trying to be inclusive, give everybody a voice here.
Okay, so the next thing is to go to the Sculptor studio, which is really neat. So in the Sculptor studio, they have a model of Mount Rushmore, and they show you how they measured it. 90% of this was dynamited. And then they had to sculpt the other and, smooth it out. But that Sculptor studio, there's almost always a ranger there giving a little presentation. Mm-hmm. And it's just cool to see the vision. I mean, even the sculpture in there looks a little different than this one because they had to change the vision to make this like 7 times. But it's cool to see the process they went through to create this.
The initial vision was to do their torsos. The scale was built 1 inch to 1 foot. So 1 inch on the scale, 1 foot on the mountain. Yeah, so that is, I can barely wrap my mind around how they possibly could have carved it. Okay, the next step is the Borglum View Terrace. So as you go around, you finish the Presidential Trail, you'll get to this place called Borglum View Terrace. It's just a nice look of the faces. But Borglum, the thing here is Borglum. They have a bust of the guy who sculpted Mount Rushmore. His name is Gutzon Borglum. They actually have 2 busts of him here that you can check out. And you want to know a little bit about Gutzon Borglum. He's just kind of a crazy, almost a megalomaniac guy. He just had a really big vision. And that's actually what's amazing is without Borglum and his vision, it would have never happened. But he was kind of a crazy guy.
Yeah, in fact, if you hear someone say Gutzon Borglum, stop what you're doing and listen to the story because you're going to be entertained. And I want to tell you a funny story about him right now. So Gutzon had this really fiery temper, and he had this habit of firing people. And like if for any little mistake, he was just, quick on the draw, fire people. And then his son Lincoln was also on this project. And so after Gutzon would have his blow up, Lincoln would kind of go behind the scenes and rehire him. And they said that Gutzon would be like, okay, yeah, I'm glad you rehired that guy. But it was like something that always happened.
But he's an interesting guy. And you learn a lot more about him too in the audio guide. Borglum, part of his vision, actually, he wanted stairs going up both sides of the faces so that you could walk to the top. And then behind, he wanted to put a cave in there that would house like the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and busts of famous people like Susan B. Anthony. He wanted this to be like a really, really special place to house important American documents and history and stuff like that. That never really happened. He ended up dying near the end of the project, and they ran out of money, and World War II started, and that really ended it. But later on, it's kind of cool, in the 1990s, they actually did put a cave or a hall of records, they call it, behind there with a few documents in there. It's not quite his original vision, but they helped him finish it.
Yeah. The next thing is to get some food. There's actually 3 places to grab food here. There is a coffee shop. There is the Memorial Team ice cream where you can get that Thomas Jefferson vanilla ice cream. And then there's a little cafeteria, Carver's Cafe. Matt actually got some food there, so we're going to have Matt give us his food review.
I got the bison burger and the bison chili. And my review on this, the food is mediocre and it's overpriced. It'll do in a pinch if you need to. But, you know, what we've done before is we've come here for the evening program, which we'll talk about in a minute, and have brought a picnic and just eaten it while we were kind of waiting for the evening program. So that's a pretty good idea. There's several places to eat in Keystone, which is right next to Mount Rushmore.
Yeah. Our pro tip is to bring in your own food. And I think one other thing I wanted to mention is we've gotten ice cream here on a separate trip, and then Matt got stuff from the cafe on this one. And both times the line moved very slowly. In my own opinion, I strongly suggest bringing your own food because you don't want to spend your whole time in line waiting for food here.
No, but I will say if you eat there from both inside and outside, you can sit there and eat while looking at the faces, and that's pretty cool. Okay, next up is to go to the Lincoln Borglum Visitor Center. So here's another Borglum for you. It's actually Gutzon Borglum loved Abraham Lincoln, so he named his son Lincoln. Lincoln ended up working on Mount Rushmore, and near the end, Gutzon died, and Lincoln Borglum took over and finished the smoothing and polishing of the faces. So he is really quite a figure in the whole carving of this.
He was their first superintendent.
First superintendent of Mount Rushmore National Memorial. Yeah. Really cool guy, Lincoln. So the visitor center is named after him. So if you go down there, they have a video that is a little older. It's still very good and educational. I think they're making a new one.
They said in 2025 there will be a new video there. And just the walkthrough, the museum is very nicely done. All sorts of cool pictures of the miners. Actually, this is something I wanted to share. Is it talks about no one had a profession of being a mountain carver. Like this was not something you could just go hire someone for.
Right.
They had to find miners and woodworkers, and in fact, they even hired baseball players that were like, because they wanted to have a baseball team, and they're like, oh, and by the way, you're going to be using dynamite too.
They were called the Memorial Team, and that's why it's called Memorial Team Ice Cream.
But yeah, all sorts of fun facts like that when you go through the museum. So that actually not a museum, it's a visitor center. So make sure to check out that visitor center.
I like seeing the size of the people in relation to the faces. So the eyes are about as tall as one of the workers. So I thought that was pretty cool. It helps give you some context.
Oh, and one other little quick tip is there are ranger programs just throughout Mount Rushmore. They'll schedule things, a lot of them are right here on the viewing deck, like the hoop dancers we saw, but there are also, they have pop-up programs where rangers will be just along the presidential walk, and they'll just teach you a little bit about whatever they want to talk about. They let the rangers pick what they want to teach.
Okay, the next thing to do is the lighting ceremony. We've been here in the morning and in the evening. Okay, so the morning is nice because the sun rises, and as you can see, oh man, that looks so cool. The sun is hitting the faces, which gives you some really good lighting for shots. If you arrive in the afternoon or evening, you can go to the lighting program. This has been a very special thing for us in the past. We really, really enjoy this. Super, super patriotic. So the crowd will start to gather in this big amphitheater that's behind us, about 45 minutes to an hour early, something like that. You want to come,
and it fills up.
It'll fill up. This whole thing will fill up.
We've been here several times, and we always go to this lighting program, except for this trip we didn't. And I have to say, I missed it. Even though I've seen it several times, you do not fully appreciate Mount Rushmore until you go to that program. They honor the veterans, and they teach you the history of the presidents and of America. So whether you're an American or whether you're visiting from another country, it's a very nice story. And it makes you grateful for the United States of America and the freedoms that we have, and for how amazing they actually pulled it off. I mean, it's just a miracle that the United States came together and was able to accomplish things like that our founding fathers had a vision for. I mean, it's really something else, and like a good thing for all ages. Like our kids have never complained during it. It's really neat.
Fun fact, it took them 14 years to carve it, and no workers died during the construction process. The other thing I learned about that ranger program is that each ranger makes their own speech for that. So they come out here in front of a massive crowd and have to deliver this speech. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on that ranger, and they just do an incredible job. They light up the faces. It's a really memorable thing for a lot of people.
Mount Rushmore is not the only thing to do when you visit the Black Hills, so check out our next video on the 15 best things to do in the Black Hills.
Thanks for watching.